Part 89. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 884. After the council set up an ambush and killed a group of Holy Sea Masters, Gretel's side was really clean for a while. So, he retreated into his mage tower, and every day. Nose. The nose is too long. Too long. Make it shorter, make it shorter, make it shorter. Eyebrow. Oh, it's crooked. Gretel looked in the mirror with a sad face and tried hard to practice the art of disguise. This spell, which is called requiring more brains than magical ability, really caused him a lot of trouble. Eyes. Eyebrows. Oops, the distance between the eyes is too wide. It looks like a child with Down syndrome. Let's try it again. What is a child with Down syndrome? Sirara suddenly poked her head at the edge. The corner of Gretel's mouth twitched, and she stretched out her 5 fingers to push her aside. Okay, I'll explain it to you when I have time. If you don't practice well enough, you will be scolded by the teacher. By the way, are your changes okay? I have no problem in the first place. The silver dragon girl giggled. There was a flash of light on her body, and her appearance suddenly changed. Blonde hair, blue eyes, oval face, and blazingly gorgeous appearance. The figure is tall and plump, turning slightly in a circle, and the skirt spreads out like flowers. The light flashed again, and the whole person suddenly became 25 centimeters shorter and weighed 40 kilograms. With her curly red hair and palm-sized baby face, anyone looking at her would think she was a 12 or 13-year-old girl. The light shines again. Stop! Cried Gretel. He later remembered that Cyrilla's transformation technique and his disguise technique were not the same thing at all. The former changes from dragon form to human form. Since she can change into an elf or a human, it is not a problem to change into several more forms. The latter is to cover oneself with a layer of illusion to achieve the purpose of changing the appearance, which only involves appearance. Of course, what should I change it to? Are the facial features coordinated or not? Is the appearance I use today the same as yesterday? This is all up to the magician himself. There are also first-level magicians who have been adventuring outside for a long time, and they have mastered the art of disguise. There are also people like Gretel, who are already at level 8 and are still in a mess. Gretel, try hard. Try it again. Maybe you will succeed this time. Sirara waved her fist vigorously to encourage Gretel. After pumping up his energy, he quickly ran to the foot of the tower, threw the disguise technique on Bernard, and then instructed Appa to practice the transformation. Get smaller. Get smaller. Become like a horse. Oh, can't you change your horns? It's winter, can you just take them off? The silver moon deer scratched its hooves unhappily. Gretel in the mage tower was still training hard against the portrait projected by Moss. Do it again. Hair. Skin color. Eyes, eyebrows, nose, lips. Phew, it's finally done this time. Boss, you are too slow. Moss supervised and judged ruthlessly. According to your teacher's requirements, you should complete a disguise spell within 1 second without a mirror, and last for a whole day. In fact, there are ways to cheat. For example, rings, pendants, tie clips, or various magic props that have solidified the disguise spell. There are some that have already solidified their appearance, and there are also those that allow the magician to enter the image and erase it at will. Gretel originally wanted to use his money ability to pass this level, but was rejected by the Lord of Thunder without hesitation. What you know is yours. The borrowed skills will never be yours. You rely on magic props every day. What if they are lost? What if they are broken? What if you happen to rely on this spell to save your life, right? Did he die there? Teacher, I understand Greed was crestfallen. No way, it seems that when the teacher was young, he traveled around the world, crossing the strait from the Kingdom of Kent, passing through the territory of the glorious Holy See, all the way to the Kingdom of Orcs, and then circling back from the Great Wasteland. After walking such a long way, not to mention combat ability, the low-level mage's 3-piece set of disguise, phantom sound, and invisibility were perfected. Therefore, it is completely incomprehensible to me that my progress is slow as I practice. Don't you use Silent Phantom very well? Then can't you show all the internal organs, muscles, bones, and blood vessels? They are all illusion magic, so why can't you learn the disguise spell? But that one is different. I know the internal organs by heart, and the disguise technique is backwards. I know about it, teacher, and I practice hard. Isn't it the same as having laparoscopic surgery? What you see with your eyes and what you operate with your hands are the opposite. You have to remind yourself that you need to be steady when you operate your hands. It will be fine once you practice. After all, sometimes, the enemy won't give you a chance to look in the mirror, nor will they give you a chance to slowly toss in spells. Whether you can complete a spell cast in the blink of an eye is sometimes the difference between life and death. Again. 1, 2, 3. The nose is crooked. Come again. The right eye is a circle bigger than the left eye. Come again. Don't tilt your chin forward. Are you Royal Brolin? Moss, I understand, I will practice hard. Can you not remind me today? T. The days passed. Gretel's disguise technique has finally been mastered to the point where it can be activated at any time. Although you can't look at a certain person and quickly turn into his appearance, there are several pre-made shapes that can be used without any difficulty. He was finally released from Nevis, changed his identity, changed his appearance, and together with Apia, who had already left the army, and Bernard, who had the help of Cyrilla to use the disguise technique, moved to another area to patrol the epidemic prevention and isolation area. And the killer of the Holy See did not come again. 5 assassins of the 12th and 3rd levels, even if the Holy See of Glory has a lot of money and owns 2 countries and thousands of miles of territory, they cannot be obtained casually. Being hunted by a trap set by the Council will make the Inquisition feel heartbroken for a long time. Even the person who presided over the assassination will inevitably be punished. Besides, going to Nevis to kill people? The manpower of the Holy See cannot be wasted like this. What was quiet for Gretel was not quiet for the people of the Netherlands. In fact, on the battlefield in the Netherlands, the war was getting fiercer and fiercer, and it was almost reaching the point where all the people were in arms. In November, the royal army pressed forward and was forced to enter the city of Dutremet. The Earl led his army to hold on to the city, while local farmers dug dikes regardless of everything. Raging waters flooded fields and submerged roads. It is foreseeable that in at least the next 10 years, the fields outside the city will see a significant reduction in production due to salinity. In the city of Dordrecht, the water is 3 feet deep. But outside the city, the army and the camp were overwhelmed and turned upside down. In that battle, nearly half of the besieging army was lost and retreated 30 miles. In December, a coalition of Dutch nobles launched an attack. The royal army united with the Inquisition, activated large-scale magic to bless all knights, and charged into battle collectively. The knights are promoted by 1 level on average, and the 3rd and 4th level cavalry of the retinue are promoted to the level of knights, like an invincible sharp knife inserted into the formation of the noble alliance. In that battle, the kingdom's army killed thousands of people, and the aristocratic coalition was routed. The black smoke from the burning corpses rose everywhere on the ground and lingered for half a month. January. The whole Netherlands is in flames. Among the nobles who once gathered around the Duke of the Netherlands and vowed to rebel together, only one was not involved in the war. The Count of Ostend still clung to his territory and lived harmoniously with the people of the Holy See. This chess piece is of great importance and must be moved at the last moment. Before that, a large number of people and materials were transported along the southernmost of the 7 connected cities on the Hall Strait side to Ostend in the north. Then, they were loaded into ships, changed into cars, and then transported to the Royal Army barracks in various parts of the Netherlands. When the army moves, it is a monster that swallows gold coins and supplies. To satisfy its appetite, simply searching in the Netherlands is obviously not enough. Although the Dutch have been plundered badly enough. Please. Please. This is the last bag of potatoes in the family. Please don't take it away, leave us half a bag. A quarter bag. At least 3. The whole family will starve to death. Ah. Let go, old woman. Are you hiding so much food to give to the enemies of the Lord of Glory? Next time you are found, your whole family, young and old, will be burned together. Leave 1 potato. Just 1. Goddamned Lord of Glory. There were shouts and curses. It is spreading, boiling, and burning across the land of the Netherlands. Soon, the magicians sent by the Parliament discovered something strange. Their magic seems to have weakened Aurora, who had been sleeping in the open for a month and whose face had turned a lot darker, said in confusion as she wiped a handful of mud on her face. He had just broken into the town with his team, blew up a church, and kidnapped the supplies. Half a month ago, I remember they were still very difficult to fight, and it was troublesome to activate the magical formation. It took 8 fireballs to explode the barrier, today only 5 were used. Maybe this church is new? Morgan Sr. asked. Aurora frowned and thought for a moment, then shook her head affirmatively. The last one was built after it was bombed. After it was built, people gathered around the church and prayed around the church for 10 days. Maybe it's because the holy objects inside are stronger? But in theory, the holy objects in a church of the same size should also be of the same size. Even if there is a gap, there is no reason to be so big. Maybe the people here don't like them anymore. Next to him, another action team member proposed a hypothesis. Without waiting for Aurora to ask back, he waved his hand in a wide circle with an excited tone. The people of the Netherlands are about to die. When we came here, how many families ran out of food and lived by digging bark and grass roots? How many families dragged their injured and bleeding bodies and cursed the king? If they curse the king, they also curse the Lord of Glory? It makes sense. It does make sense. Old Morgan also joined the discussion. The old knight used his rich combat experience to provide evidence to the young magicians. A few years ago, it was the same when we drove the Glory Holy See out of the kingdom. Where there are many churches and strong forces, their magic is strong. Where we have many temples, their magic is weak. So the key is faith? The power of faith. It's possible. Let's write a report and report this matter to the Parliament. 3,000 words. An additional update has been completed. 8 more to go. Please give me monthly votes, recommend votes, book reviews, and all kinds of things. There are so few monthly tickets today, and the number has dropped to more than 400. I'm sad, at least give me the guaranteed monthly ticket for June. The author Meow is a baby, and the author Meow wants a Children's Day gift. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 885. Jean Madeleine quietly closed the door. He put his ear against the crack of the door and listened with bated breath. He didn't hear any sound in the room for a long time, and then he breathed a sigh of relief. Fine. He subconsciously drew a circle on his chest and connected 7 dots outside the circle to symbolize the sacred power of the Lord of Glory. As for the teachings now that have been changed, there should be 9 points or something. Sorry, a low-level servant like him has formed a habit for more than 10 years and has not changed it yet. Jean stood on tiptoes, quietly. Go to the back door of the church and open the door a crack. Before anyone outside could say anything, He had already put his index finger on his lips and said shhhh forcefully. "My Lord Bishop is asleep. Don't make any sound and follow me." A group of wet farmers walked in with him on tiptoes and holding their breath. Jean took them to a side room, settled them in, and brought over a few coarse towels. "You guys stay here for one night first. The bishop has been busy all day today and has just fallen asleep. Don't wake him up. Don't wake anyone." Behind him, a kind voice asked with a smile. Jean turned around in surprise. At the same time, all the farmers stood up and saluted unevenly. "Your Majesty Bishop. Your Majesty Bishop. Bishop Miria." Bishop Miria is an old man in his 60s or 70s, with a white beard and white hair, a thin face, and the white cassock on his body is almost transparent after washing. He held a candlestick with his left hand, stretched his right hand flat, and raised it upward to prevent the farmers from saluting. Sit down, my children. You have worked hard to come here in the rain on such a cold day. Jean, go and heat up a bowl of oatmeal to keep everyone warm. Your Majesty Bishop. Go." Jean lowered his head silently and quickly walked out of the room without saying a word. Bishop Miria looked around and said harmoniously, "The Lord says, you should listen to the suffering of the lambs and lend a helping hand to them. Children, what happened to make you come to see me in such a hurry?" The crowd fell silent for a moment. The farmers looked at me and I looked at you without saying a word. After a long time, the farmer with the oldest age and the most wrinkles on his face spoke tremblingly. "Master Bishop, we want to beg you, we want to beg you. Please save our food." A young man blurted out. He clenched his fists tightly, and the muscles on his strong arms bulged one by one. "The royal army robbed, the Inquisition robbed, the Inquisition robbed, and the nearby knights robbed again. If you don't surrender, you are disloyal to the Lord of Glory. If you are not loyal to the Lord of Glory, you will be burned on the rack. The grain stored in the warehouse is empty, the chickens, ducks, pigs and sheep in the pen are gone, and even the seeds on the rafters have been taken away. There was a big disaster last year and there was no harvest, and this year even the seeds are taken away." With a plop, another farmer fell to his knees. He stretched out his rough and cracked hands, palms upward, and stretched out the black and red chilblains in front of the bishop. "Master Bishop, does the Lord of Glory mean to let us all starve to death?" "Don't doubt the mercy of the Lord." Bishop Miria was taken aback and retorted subconsciously. He reflexively drew a circle on his chest, dotted 7 dots, paused, and dotted 2 more. "The Lord says, whoever believes in me sincerely, I will give him eternal blessings. I will take him into my kingdom of heaven, where there will never be hunger, there will never be cold, there will never be pain, and the rivers will flow with milk and honey." The farmers followed him in praying together. In the midst of the prayers, white light flows slowly, rippling gently on the bishop's vestments, candlesticks, and rosary beads on his wrists. The farmers who participated in the prayer were also enveloped in a faint white light. For a time, the pain subsided, the wounds healed, and the whole person felt a little more energetic. "Thank you, Lord of Light, for your grace. Thank you for the grace of the Lord of Glory." The farmers' expressions became more relaxed and relaxed. After a long prayer, Jean happened to bring a tray over with a large pot and 7 or 8 pottery bowls on it. "Come on, let's all have a bowl, have a bowl." He reluctantly picked up the copper spoon and poured oatmeal into the pottery bowl one by one. The porridge water was turbid, and in a large spoonful of porridge, only a few grains floated up. Even if it is such porridge and soup, the farmers hold it carefully in their hands and drink it carefully. Take a few sips and swirl the ceramic bowl. Try to make the grains inside stir up as much as possible to avoid sticking to the bottom of the bowl. You need to stick out your tongue to lick the bowl in front of the bishop. "Why so few?" Bishop Miria frowned. Jean lowered his head silently and stubbornly pressed his lips into a straight line. Bishop Miria looked at him carefully and sighed. Forget it, bring the bread from the cupboard. Bishop. That's your day tomorrow. It's rare for everyone to come here once, and we can't let them spend the night hungry. Go ahead. Bishop Miria said softly. After this question and answer, the farmers in the room all reacted and stopped one after another. No, no, no. We're not hungry. Look, I'm full. The young man who was the first to complain pushed his belly up hard and slapped it twice. Bishop Miria lowered his gaze and sighed silently. Besides a bag of water, what else could be in this belly? He subconsciously marked the holy symbol again, without noticing that this time his finger only clicked 7 points. The farmer raised his eyes and looked around the room. How much food do you want to store? The farmers looked relaxed. The old farmer who took the lead in speaking took a step forward, bowed and said, Master Bishop, we don't dare to be greedy. Each family only needs to save 2 bags of grain. 2 bags. As long as next year's grain seeds can be saved, the harder it is, the harder it is. Picking acorns, digging grass roots, and peeling bark, you can always succeed. Live. Bishop Miria was silent, silent. After a long silence, he showed determination and nodded heavily. Dozens of bags of grain were carried into the church. Bishop Miria personally led the way, leading them into the cellar and around to the deepest corner. He knelt down and prayed a few words, a faint white light glowed on his palms, and he reached out and pushed. This is it. Put them all in. The farmers left with great gratitude. Bishop Miria sent them to the back door, watched them disappear into the dark rainy night, frowned and sighed. How did it become like this? How could it be like this? Merciful Lord of glory, please let your light shine on all things, please have mercy on your people and save your people. He was so worried that he fell down before the icon that night and prayed all night. On the icon and the altar, the faint light lasts for a long time. This church still has holy power. Yes, the holy power reserve is quite good. In the rainy night, 2 magicians flew down on the wall silently. One of the 2 waved his hand to activate detection magic, and the other opened the instrument and skillfully measured and recorded. Peripheral holy power reaction, red, 57. The central building's holy power response, orange, 32. The reaction of the holy power of the icon and the altar, why doesn't this old man leave? The magician came and went without disturbing anyone. The place was peaceful for 7 or 8 days, and then, a wave of iron hooves broke the peace around the church. According to the order of the general, this parish must raise 8,000 pounds of food and deliver it to the military camp in 3 days. The messenger did not dismount at all, but arrogantly threw down a document. If there is any delay, shortage, or shoddy quality, it will be considered as deliberately delaying the military flight and being disloyal to the Lord of Glory. He knocked the horse's belly, turned around and left. There was a loud noise in the inner hall, and Bishop Miria rushed out holding his robe. Wait a minute, 8,000 pounds will definitely not do it. There are only 1,000 people in this parish, and food has been collected 3 times. 3 times. This is the general's order. The messenger raised his whip and pointed at the document on the ground. The tribunal also signed it. Remember, 3 days, only 3 days. Bishop Miria stayed at the door. He picked up the paperwork with trembling hands, read it again, and then read it again. Finally, he pressed the document tightly to his chest and raised his head to the sky. Merciful Lord! He ran for 3 days and begged for 3 days. 3 days later, the old bishop led the villagers and dragged 5 wooden carts to the military camp. Why is this so? The counting clerk glanced at it and frowned. This kind of wooden cart can carry a maximum of 500 pounds, and it will not weigh more than 600 pounds if it is crushed. 5 cars, 2,500 pounds, less than 3,000 pounds to hold up. The military order requires 8,000 pounds. Less than half was delivered. What does this mean? He wanted to rebuke, but seeing the bishop's white beard and white hair, thin clothes, and trembling in the cold wind, he couldn't bear to speak. After a pause, he whispered. Hurry back and collect money to make up for it. I'll write down part of it for you first and won't report it to you. Send the rest before tonight. Don't hurt me. There are only so many. Bishop Miria smiled bitterly. He spread his hands and took a few shots from top to bottom. Candlesticks, dishes, rosary beads, furniture, I took out everything I could. I only raised this little food, our diocese is really out of food. What happened? The horse's hooves were heard behind him, and someone raised his voice and asked. Bishop Miria turned his head and saluted quickly. Archbishop. What are the tasks of their diocese? The archbishop frowned and stretched out his hand. The clerk hurriedly delivered the document. The archbishop unfolded the document and his face darkened as soon as he saw it. This is military rations. Do you want the soldiers of the Lord of Glory to fight hungry? Can't raise it? Why are you the only one who can't raise it when everyone else has raised it? Someone, go and search. As soon as the order was given, a black knight rushed out from a distance like the wind and lightning. Bishop Miria was taken to a tent and ordered not to wander around. Within half a day, a horseman returned and reported to the archbishop. We found food. It's in the cellar of the church. There are dozens of bags. It's also covered with a magic circle. If Brother Adam hadn't been careful, he wouldn't have been able to find it. The archbishop looked over with a stern face. Bishop Miria was immediately anxious. You can't drag this away. This is seed food. It's the seed food they entrusted to me. With the seeds, we won't starve to death next year, and the people will have hope. So soldiers can starve to death. The archbishop retorted. Without waiting for his answer, he waved his hand and another group of men rushed out, obviously dragging the seeds. You can't do this. You can't do this. Bishop Miria stopped one person and another, but he was alone and could not stop anyone. In desperation, he suddenly fell to his knees and prayed loudly. O Lord, your light shines all-seeing, and your holy wisdom sees all things, please have mercy on your people and save your people. A flash of white light lit up from his body, vigorously illuminating the entire camp. The white light was like substance, blocking the entrance to the entire tent and all the knights who wanted to rush out. The archbishop was furious. Presumptuous! Are you going to disobey our Lord's will? This is not our Lord's will. Bishop Miria raised his head and said. The authority of the Holy See comes from our Lord, and we are herding his lambs on our Lord's behalf. We should listen to their pain and comfort their sorrow, instead of robbing their food and watching them starve to death. As he spoke, the holy light condensed and faintly formed the shapes of the holy emblem and the holy sword. The archbishop's face darkened. Miria, in consideration of your many years of contribution, I will give you another chance. Get out of the way and wait for the punishment, otherwise, do you think the tribunal will not execute you? Impossible. The old bishop raised his head high, with white beard and white hair, and said automatically in the absence of wind. I have been taking care of the Lamb of the Lord for more than 60 years according to the will of our Lord and the assignment of the Holy See. Unless I die today, otherwise, if you want to harm the people of my diocese, you have to step on my body first. Even if I die, you are also returning to my Lord's kingdom of God. I'm waiting for you to go to hell. Very good, you are going to rebel. The archbishop nodded solemnly. Come here. Bishop Miria has violated the will of the Holy See, deprived of his membership, and sentenced to death at the stake. He raised his hand and pointed. A sharp white light shot out of his hand, beating Bishop Miria until he vomited blood on the spot and flew backwards in the air. The knights swarmed forward, raising their hands and feet, and tied him to the stake. Thick smoke rose and flames rolled. And among the rising flames, the pure white holy light continued for a long time. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 886. Jean-Madeleine was wandering around the church. He felt bad before Bishop Miria left. £3,000 of millet, what's the use of £3,000? That's more than half less than the number required by the mission. If the villagers hand over food, they will definitely be beaten to death. Even if it is the bishop, he will not be able to get away with it if he falls into the hands of those guys who eat people without spitting out their bones. Bishop, please take away the grains in the cellar. Let's pass this level first. Only after you save it can you rescue others. He stopped in front of him and begged. His lips were worn out and his saliva was dry. Bishop Miria just smiled. The Lord said that you must treat others with integrity and do not deceive those who trust you. Jean, what those villagers entrusted to me was not only seeds, but also the hope of surviving next year, and their trust in the Lord. And this kind of trust cannot be betrayed no matter what. Jean tried to persuade them to no avail, and could only watch the villagers loading bags of grain into the cart, pushing them away after the bishop. He hesitated again, then suddenly stomped into the room, took out a pair of silver candlesticks, and stuffed them into the bishop's arms. "Sir, take this with you. Just in case, just in case." He couldn't go on. However, from the smiling eyes of Bishop Miria, he could see that the other party understood what he meant. In case the superiors are angry, having such a valuable thing can protect you from suffering. Haha, I won't take it. However, under Jean's expectant eyes, the old man still pushed the candlestick back. "This is your thing, what should I do with it?" "This is yours. You gave it to me." Jean growled at the top of his lungs. Bishop Miria smiled even more kindly. "This is the price I paid for redeeming your soul and handing it over to the Lord. Jean, promise me to keep it? Every time you see it, you must remember your agreement with the Lord." "Yes, Lord Bishop, I will definitely remember." Jean nodded repeatedly. He held the candlestick tightly with his thick fingers, and after a moment of prayer, a faint white light rose from the candlestick. Bishop Miria nodded slightly and smiled more kindly. "This puts me at ease. Remember the Lord's mercy, and don't fall into darkness." He never came back. Jean held the pair of silver candlesticks and watched the motorcade meander away, leaving only two deep ruts. Watch the sun rise from the beginning to the zenith, and then gradually set from the zenith to the west. Watching a pair of cavalry showing off their skills, rushing into the church and rummaging around. Then he watched the second group of people arrive and take away all the food in the church cellar. Subconsciously, he wrapped the silver candlestick in his arms with the rags used to wipe the floor, and pressed it under him. The cellars were cleared and the cavalry came and went. Jean huddled in the corner of the empty cellar, his eyes dull. After an unknown amount of time, he was shaken awake by two anxious villagers. "What are you still doing here?" "Bishop Miria, they are going to burn him to death." Jean jumped up, hugged the wrapped silver candlestick, and rushed out quickly. Hucka, wheeze. He didn't know how long he ran, but he only knew that he was as strong as the night and his lungs almost exploded. Close, the stern military camp is close, the tent of Shengui is close. What is that? What is that billowing column of black smoke? Why were there so many people crowded around the black smoke? Why were several villagers he knew kneeling and crying in the distance? "You're late, Jean, you're late." Among the villagers who knelt and cried, there were the two leaders who came to store wheat on that rainy night. They only shouted this, then buried their heads and burst into tears. Jean looked at them blankly. For a long time, he let out a long howl. He took out the pair of candlesticks, tore off the rags on them like crazy, and rushed straight to the entrance of the camp. Bishop Miria is innocent. Innocent, he raised the candlestick high and let the light of the setting sun shine on it, making it brilliant. It's me, it's me. It was me who secretly sold the army rations in exchange for these candlesticks. Let him go. Let him go. Well. A soft sigh sounded from the camp gate. Then, a white light as thick as a bowl shot straight out, hitting Jean on the chest and sending him and the candlestick flying out. Law, confinement. A clear drink. Jean suddenly felt his whole body stiff, unable to get up, speak, or even move his fingers. The robes were fluttering in the camp, and a bishop dressed similarly to Miria walked out and looked down at him. Miria was not executed because of a lack of military rations. Don't yell, stay away, and don't be arrested by them together, do you understand? Just blink your eyes when you understand. When the burning is over, you can come and collect his body. Jean didn't understand. But he knew that this strange bishop had his own good in mind. Moreover, Bishop Miria cannot live without a body collector. He blinked obediently. The bishop sighed softly, turned and left. After a long while, Jean finally felt that he could move his hands and feet and got up. He retreated, hugging the candlestick tightly, retreating further than the villagers. Then, staring at the high pile of firewood in the distance, he let out a long howl and knelt down. The bishop is innocent. He is innocent. Look, the holy light. He still has the holy light on him. You are burning a saint to death. He grabbed the ground with his head, and the trombone continued. Maybe it was because he was too far away, or maybe it was because someone had told him that no one in the military camp came out to pay attention to him. Until the flames gradually extinguished, until there were fewer and fewer people around the Mars shelf, finally there were only a few soldiers left. Jean cautiously approached and discussed with them. Brother, can you do it for me and let me collect the body? Roll, roll, roll. The squad leader guarding the execution site blasted him impatiently. Jean took a step back, smiled more respectfully, and bent lower. Brother, please be kind, after all, you are also a member of the Holy See. Even if you die, leaving your body in the wilderness like this will damage the majesty of the Holy See. What majesty? The squad leader raised his eyes. He had been exposed to the smoke all afternoon. He was hot, smelly, and choked, and he was feeling irritable. He rubbed his fingers impatiently, but seeing no reaction from the man in front of him, he raised his voice and yelled. If a heretic is burned to death, what dignity is there? Do you still want to collect his body? Tell me, are you an accomplice of the heretic? The voice got louder and louder. Sure enough, as soon as he finished the last sentence, someone shouted and asked. What's the situation? Sir, there is a heretic accomplice here. The squad leader reported loudly. There were heavy steps behind him, and a knight with clanging armor strode forward. He glanced around majestically and snorted coldly. That's him. Take it down. The squad leader responded and stepped forward to arrest the person. In a flash of lightning, Jean finally reacted and quickly fell to the ground. He raised the pair of candlesticks high and prayed secretly, so that a little holy light would shine on them. Sir! Please have mercy, sir! This is a little man's heart. Please contribute it to God and give the bishop some dignity. The knight said hey and waved his hand. The two soldiers stopped immediately. The squad leader took away the pair of candlesticks and bowed before the knight. Sir, look at this. This poor guy in the country is quite rich, the knight muttered quietly, put his hands behind his back, and walked away slowly. The squad leader hurriedly followed up holding a silver candlestick. Behind him, a group of soldiers followed, and soon there were no defenders around the execution ground. Jean collapsed on his knees, watching the holy light on the candlestick slowly dim and fade away. His eyes also darkened little by little, as if his agreement with Bishop Miria and the agreement with the Lord of Glory were also far away from him. "Hey, kid," the captain stared at the candlestick in his hand unwillingly and suddenly stopped. He thrust the candlestick into the soldier's hand, took 3 steps at a time, and returned to Jean. "Don't even think about burying him in a church cemetery. Heretics like him, and heretical assistants like you, are subject to excommunication and excommunication." Jean's eyes were empty and blank. It wasn't until everyone was gone that he let out a long howl, threw himself on the woodpile, and started digging with all his hands. "Your Majesty the Bishop! Your Majesty the Bishop! Your Majesty the Bishop!" The fire went out, but the ashes were still hot. Jean, however, seemed to have no feeling at all. He knelt on the pile of ash and dug down hard with his hands. "Pick up a handful of ashes and put them next to you, then pick up a handful of ashes and put them next to you." Within 2 strokes, the fingers and palms were scalded with blisters, and after 2 strokes, the skin and flesh were torn apart. Jean didn't care, and dug in the ashes wholeheartedly. After a while, he picked up a bone from the ashes and burst into tears. "Your Majesty the Bishop! Your Majesty the Bishop! The vast majority of human bones have been reduced to ashes and particles under the blazing flames with the addition of divine magic, mixed in the firewood ash, and cannot be identified." However, the bone that Jean held up was complete in shape, hard and solid, and glowed with a faint silver light. In the cathedral that the bishop took him to worship, and in the stories that the bishop told him, this is the holy bone that can only be condensed by those who have become saints. He is a saint, the one you burned to death is really a saint. He fell down on the woodpile and cried bitterly. It took a long time before the villagers who had the courage to step forward pulled him up and persuaded him to get down from the pyre. He held the sacred bone in his hand and watched in confusion as the villagers shoveled away the ashes and put them into the wooden box. "Jean! Your hands, treat yourself." Jean came to his senses dazedly. He lowered his head and looked at his fingers, closed his eyes silently, and prayed softly. Once, twice, no matter how many times, no light of healing fell on my fingers. "Oh, I'm a heretic," he said softly, grinning. The smile gets bigger and bigger, more and more terrifying. "I am an assistant to heretics. People like me will be excommunicated and excommunicated, I can't use magic." He stood up unsteadily, took the wooden box from the villager, put the holy bones into the box and closed it. Holding the box, 1 foot deep, 1 foot shallow, and heading into the wilderness. "Mr. Bishop, I will take you to find a cemetery, the cemetery next to the church is not open for burials, let's find a good one." He walked slowly away in the dusk. Behind them, a group of villagers looked at each other, pulling carts behind them. After walking through a night and half a day, Jean suddenly looked up and found that he had reached a village near the church. "Priest Madeleine, bury the bishop here." 2 villagers came up timidly and spoke. "Here is the cemetery of our village. Generations of our ancestors are buried here, it is not as good as the church. Please don't dislike it." "Dislike it? I don't despise it, and neither will the bishop." Jean lowered his head and stroked the surface of the wooden box, leaving a stain of blood and black ash on it. "Just here, it's very good here, very good." Without much greeting, the villagers had already gathered at the cemetery. Those who dig pits, and those who pick up rocks. Even children as young as 3 or 4 years old helped to pull out the surrounding weeds under the guidance of adults. Jean leaned down and put the wooden box containing the sacred bones into the tomb surrounded by a circle of stones. Someone immediately helped fill it with soil. After everything was completed, someone brought a little boy over. "Priest of Madeline, could you please take a look at the child? This child has been burning for 2 days. But, I no longer have any healing skills." Jean lowered his head and stretched out his hand. "On my hands, the skin was charred and the flesh was rotten. After a day and a night of delay, pus had already leaked out in some places. I am a heretic. They said that I will be excommunicated and punished with excommunication. I can no longer use healing." There was a chorus of lamentations. Suddenly, the strongest young man in the village spat fiercely. "They said you can't, so why can't you? The Lord of Glory really wanted to watch, and he didn't even strike them to death with the thunderbolt. The Lord of Glory didn't watch, so why did they say you can't?" "Yes. Yeah. Jean Madeleine slowly raised his eyes. A little light gradually lit up in his empty eyes. It was the tombstone of Bishop Miria, an ordinary wooden board with the words "A good man is buried here" written in his own hand on it. Those are the sacred bones in the wooden box. Even if they are buried in ashes, they still glow with a faint silver light. That is the holy light that never goes out in the flames and black smoke of the torture rack until death. They said I couldn't. But, what are they? He suddenly raised his hand. "Bend your arms, return your wrists, and draw a circle on your chest. 7 points around the circle." In an instant, bright holy light burst out from the palms of his scorched flesh. "Wherever it goes, wounds heal, and scar falls off. My faith and my magic come from the Lord of Glory, not from the Holy See. I cried several times while writing about myself today. With tears streaming down my face, I stretched out my paws, asking for subscriptions, monthly tickets, recommendation votes, book reviews, and all kinds of things. P.S. Jean Valjean, his name was Madeleine when he was mayor. This morning I went to 5 nucleic acid sites for nucleic acid testing. 4 of them queued for more than half an hour, possibly more than an hour. According to nearby security, one of the nucleic acid workers got into an argument with someone else and left. Don't do it. Reader, fortunately, I didn't kill Hwaseong while the wine was warm, otherwise he would not come back until the wine had cooled down. When asked, it took Hwaseong 5 minutes and half an hour to pass the nucleic acid test before entering the camp. But things were much better this afternoon. 2 of the 3 nucleic acid sites I passed by only had a few people, and the queue time was visually within 2 minutes. Hope things get better. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 887. The war in the Netherlands is currently in a stalemate, with the front lines stagnating in the central area. The third batch of magicians who went to the front line for training returned, with a casualty rate of less than 3%. None of the magicians sent by Thunderhorn died. The Parliament has observed that a new group of glorious divine priests have appeared in the Netherlands. They do not obey the orders of the Holy See, and they do not even think that their divine magic comes from the Holy See. Gretel Nordmark. Ah! Greet was startled and came back to his senses. Unfortunately, he has a lot of tasks during this period, and he is busy day and night. Daily hospital work needs to be done, and daily subordinates need to be guided. Magic needs to be practiced, mental power needs to be practiced, and physical combat needs to be practiced. At the very least, it cannot stop before becoming a knight. The art of disguise has not yet reached the teacher's requirements, and it takes at least an hour every day. The teacher opened up a lot of internal information on level 7, 8, and 9 magic. Not only did it include magic descriptions, but also combat records and image descriptions. It was so hard to memorize it every day. If the spellcaster had not ensured 8 hours of sleep every day, otherwise there would be no spells the next day. Gretel doubted that the teacher would really let him stay up all night, and then another, up to 4 hours of sleep every day. Under such a tense pace, it was normal for him to desert from the weekly meeting. What's more, the regular meeting hasn't started yet, and the teacher hasn't come yet. They are the brothers and sisters gathered together to watch the recent news broadcast by the tower spirit. Gretel, did you hear what I just said? Senior brother Baebo raised his voice slightly. If you simply want to be a magician, you can naturally bury your head in the laboratory and ignore what is going on outside the window. However, as a disciple of the Lord of Thunder, he naturally has to bear more responsibilities than others. Without knowing anything about the situation and changes in the outside world, it is easy to be led into a trap, which in turn affects the entire division. Not to mention, a low position and a narrow vision will not be beneficial to the magician's own development in the long run. He stared at the young junior brother who was distracted in the meeting, and was ready to give him a few words of truth if Gretel couldn't answer the question. Well, don't be too harsh, little Greet can still be taught. Unexpectedly, he did not get the opportunity to preach. Greet blinked, as if sleepwalking, and actually started to repeat. The Parliament has observed that a different group of clergymen have appeared in the Netherlands. They do not think that their magical powers come from the Holy See. Hey! At this point in the retelling, he screamed like a cat that stretched out its claws to the pen and burned itself. Archmage Baebo held back a sigh. What's wrong? What a surprise! Justified by faith, Gretel opened his eyes wide, looking like you didn't even think of this, and gestured. You can still have divine magic if you don't obey the Holy See. Divine magic does not come from the Holy See, this is justification by faith. They actually even came up with this. This is a big killer. If it is played well, it can directly split the Holy See. Of. How to say? Everyone can directly contact God. Everyone can read the classics on their own, rely on their own beliefs to contact God, and obtain divine magic. No one is nobler than anyone else. Gretel waved his hands wildly. Then the glorious Holy See, the spokesperson and agent of God on earth, go away. Little Gretel is right, a clear voice suddenly sounded. Everyone present stood up and turned around. Before everyone saluted, the Lord of Thunder waved his hand and said leisurely. We were also discussing this just now. Historically, there have been many people who were independent of the Holy See and obtained divine magic on their own, but most of them were burned to death by the Holy See. This time the power of the Holy See is weakened, and the opportunity is better. Well, Gretel, go on, how should we make use of this? Ah! Gretel was stunned. Use. How to use it? No one is taking advantage of it. Historically, it seems that Martin Luther published the 95 Theses, and then Protestantism appeared, and then they started fighting. What impressed him most about Protestantism now was that it was the Church of England. King Henry VIII of England remarried for divorce, divorced again, remarried, gave up Catholicism and turned to Protestantism. It seems that in history, the bloodshed between Catholics and Protestants was no less than the number of people who died during the Crusades. The above are fragments of knowledge found in junior high school and high school history books. As for how to use it, it was hard for him. It was not written in the book. By the way, 95 Theses. I think a theoretical system may be needed to unify these clergy, he said hesitantly while turning his brain rapidly. Let them know that their approach is correct. They can use this theory to promote, influence more people, and fight against the glorious Holy See. The theoretical system is needed at all times. Whether it is the Renaissance or anything else, it must be guided by a theoretical system to move forward steadily and far. The more Gretel talked, the faster his mind started spinning. This theory must be rigorous, complete, and self-contained. It is best to refute many of the current practices of the glorious Holy See and deny them theoretically. Like indulgences or something. Alas, I wonder if the glorious Holy See here sells indulgences? Maybe they don't sell it at all. After all, selling holy water is enough. The Lord of Thunder looked at Gretel with interest. The news on the battlefield in the Netherlands was screened at all levels and discussed at the review meeting. Only these few were reported to their legendary mage. This was the only one that aroused their interest, and the only one that had been discussed heatedly before. And little Greet, dozing off and wandering around, actually focused on this one item. What is this? Intuitive. How should I write it? What should I write specifically? He asked deliberately. Gretel spread out his hands and said confidently. I have no idea. I really don't know. Greet's momentum instantly dropped from reasonable and confident to even if the reasoning is unclear, and within a second, it quickly dropped to aggrieved. I'm not a believer in the Lord of Glory. I'm not studying theology. How could I know? Martin Luther was a professional theological scholar. Not me. He is a doctor of theology and a professor of theology, and has devoted himself to research for decades. Such long-term research is fake. At least they have understood the teachings thoroughly. This 95 theses, if you ask me to write it, I can probably only write it like this. Article 1, Justification by Faith. Human beings have a direct connection with God through faith, without having to go through the Holy See. Articles 2 to 95, omitted. If Martin Luther had really written like this, it would have been impossible for him to found Protestantism, and it would have been very possible for him to be beaten to death. Fortunately, he now has the Magic Council behind him, so professional matters can only be left to professionals. Gretel calmly passed the blame. Find a group of priests from the nature religion, the temple of the god of war, and the temple of the goddess of spring to draft together. They are priests after all. Archmage Baebo looked slightly sideways. You say this as if you are not a natural priest. How many of the doctrines and classics of the natural deism have you read so far? How many have you memorized? This opening is to find people from the three temples to write it together, so you just leave it to the parliament, right? The Lord of Thunder also complained silently. After thinking about it, Gretel is more inclined to be a magician, which is what everyone is happy to see happen. He nodded calmly. This is one of the alternative options. Well, if we adopt this option, what should we do? After writing it, send people to distribute it on the mainland? Or should we just use memory weaving technique and select someone to spread it? In fact, after the plan was discussed, the undead legend was the most interested. Your Excellency the Immortal even took the initiative to ask for permission to go to the mainland to choose a suitable partner. Then, use the 9-ring magic memory weaving technique to inject the entire theory into that person's mind. Well, this might not be good. Greet thought about it and then dismissed it. If such a long story suddenly appeared in my mind, I would definitely think that I was crazy, or else, I was affected by someone else's spell. It's better for this kind of thing to grow naturally. That's right, that's right. The Lord of Thunder secretly praised his disciple. In fact, after Immortal proposed the plan, he was immediately slapped back by Steiner, using the exact same reason. Sure enough, they were dead bones, with no brains in their skulls. He couldn't see things that a child could see. He squirted silently in his mind and continued to urge Greet. Greet couldn't be pushed, so he quickly used his brain and decided to plagiarize history again. Well, if that doesn't work, just find some theological researchers from the glorious Holy See. It's best to be honest and simple, not dissatisfied with the style of the core members of the Holy See, and also famous. The best ones are the best, come from poor families, and are relatively young. Are you energetic? What they came up with should look more right? More rigorous, more thoughtful, and less likely to be refuted by the original system? It was done by outsiders, but something is always wrong. Then what? The Lord of Thunder smiled. Gretel's eyes widened. Then let it go. There will definitely be those local nobles and local lords who are in need of divine magic, may still believe in the Lord of Radiance a little bit, but hate being controlled by the Holy See, who will lend a hand to help. Why was Martin Luther spared at that time? Like because he's German? By the way, he is German, and the Holy See is in Italy. Germany wants independence, but no one can deal with it. Gretel thought about it and added, "Oh, it's best to choose such a person from the local lords from the beginning." And then, the Lord of Thunder became more and more interesting as he listened. He simply took out the things discussed at the legendary meeting one by one and teased Greet to speak. Does the Parliament want to get in touch with those people? Does it want to win them over? Does it want to fund them and support them? Greet shook his head, then shook his head. That is to say, his warrior level is not high and he cannot shake his head fast, otherwise he may have shaken out after images. It's better not to, right? Most of the people who would make such a theory are those with the strongest and purest beliefs. Direct funding would be a bad thing. Let the local lords win over them. Let's win over the local lords. Happy Zongzi Festival everyone. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks to @Muijio Jinlin for the reward of 500 starting coins. Thanks to @Jendan Pest for tipping 100 starting coins. What rice dumplings did you eat today? Sweet rice dumplings or salty rice dumplings? It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 888. No matter how great the development potential of these magical practitioners who do not recognize the Holy See may be in the future, and can even split and shake the authority of the Holy See, their current power can still be said to be very weak. So, all the Parliament can do now is to observe them carefully. Inform the allies across the sea and provide them with some protection and resources. Don't let them die before they grow up. As for the war with the Holy See and the Kingdom of Brolin, we still have to grit our teeth and fight it seriously day by day. And Gretel, after completing the periodic coursework, finally left Nevis again and rushed to his mission. Your Excellency, the big room is full again. What should I do? Can you let them squeeze in? Instead of 10 people per room, it will be changed to 15 people per room. As soon as we arrived at the isolation point, the person in charge rushed over to ask. Gretel briefly recalled the situation in this area and shook his head decisively. No. The current living density has reached its limit. If the density is higher, the infection rate will increase rapidly, and your treatment efficiency will not be able to keep up. But it's been raining these days. It will be rainy in the next month, so we can't let them get wet in the rain. I come. Gretel looked around and found an open space. The oak staff rested on the ground, 8 green leaves swaying silently, and the grass and trees rustled, moving according to his thoughts. Long. 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 The weeds move and the vines tangle. Based on straight tree trunks, with intertwined vines as walls, and wildly growing grass leaves as fillings, tree houses are coiled one after another. These can shelter from the wind and rain, and you can live here for a while. I will apply for more resources. In short, if they want a population, they have to invest in me. Your Excellency, Special Envoy, there have been too many people sick recently, and the ward turnover rate has dropped too sharply. At the next isolation point, another person in charge came to complain. Gretel came to look at the booklet. Knights do not need to be quarantined. As long as they are fine on site and have no illness or fever, they are allowed to move freely throughout the quarantine site. Barbarians do not need to be quarantined unless they have obvious problems. Make room for me. Then, increase the supply of medicines and magical healing spells, so that the sick can recover quickly. Gretel keeps changing his appearance and his name. Relying on his status as the parliamentary special envoy for epidemic prevention, he ran 1,000 kilometers along the coast and visited dozens of epidemic prevention points in a row. Fortunately, the weather was calm this time, and we didn't encounter anything that seemed like an attack. It is estimated that he was beaten very painfully before, so we can't recruit manpower for the time being, or we can't find him for the time being. Then, Gretel rushed back to Nevis with the information in his arms and worry. With a bang, he threw it in front of Moss. I knew it was time to work again. Before he gave the order, the tower spirit had already lit up slightly and responded lazily. Gretel. Moss, why did you become like this? You were not such a moss before. I didn't force you 996,007 to sign a struggle agreement or a voluntary salary reduction agreement. It's not like you have to optimize yourself at the age of 35, and go straight out into society with a mortgage of millions and 2 children. We didn't ask you to bid, so only those with the smallest salary reductions will be retained, and everyone else will be laid off. The tailings in the hospital next door were all copied by you, and I didn't let you compete. At most I don't give you a salary. Besides, you, a tower spirit, don't need a salary. Who needs a tower spirit to spend money? And when you need to upgrade, when you need energy, I will allocate energy to you. Why do you act like you don't want to work? Moss, scan this information and compare it with the previous issue. He tried his best to ignore Talling's complaints and directly ordered the proportion of the number of sick people in each period, the proportion of various diseases, and draw a curve chart according to time. Draw one for each isolation point, and another for the total. Let me see if the trend has changed. Okay, master. Moss replied weakly. With a swish sound, 4 invisible servants appeared at the same time. Each of them stretched out 2 hands and began to help the tower spirit flip through the record book. And Greet, holding his hands behind his back, wandered towards his room. After being outside for so many days, let me take a good bath. Come down and exercise first. You haven't done your night training today yet. Training is something you have to persevere and never stop for a day. Ah 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 ah. Gretel screamed. Why is it so difficult to go from level 4 warrior to knight? Can I take drugs to move up? I finally created the direct current cardioversion technique, but I can't protect myself. This is too painful. He hurriedly changed his clothes, put on weight-bearing clothing, came down to run laps, lifted barbells, swung his sword, and sparred with old Morgan. Aurora completed the 2-month battlefield mission and returned safely. Now if she has some enlightenment, she lives in the Mage Tower and draws spell models every day. And old Morgan, who had finished his protection mission, started to fight with him every day. A 14th level senior knight who has trained countless warriors. He is rich in experience and his eyes are infinitely more sinister than Bernard's. Whenever he has the slightest thought of being lazy, he will be yelled at. Do that action just now 20 times again. At the end of the round of sparring, Gretel was panting and the last bit of energy had been squeezed out. He struggled and reached under himself, released a floating saucer, carried himself all the way back to the dormitory, and poured himself into the bath. Boss, the calculation results are out, do you want to see them? Moss, can you please stop pinching me when I take a bath from now on? But boss, when you took a bath in the past, you always liked to read some information, saying it was effortless and no waste of time. Gretel. We can't have this tower spirit anymore. I've learned how to talk back to my master. Unhappily, he sat up a little from the water and looked at the light and shadow cast by the tower spirit. After looking at the 2 charts, I was confused and sat upright. Moss, speed up. Okay boss. The tower spirit swiped and sped up. Gretel had to use all his mental strength to keep up with the speed of light and shadow flipping, point after point, disease type after disease, chart after chart. At most points, starting from this spring, the curve has a clear upward trend. Then look at the diseases: dysentery, chickenpox, smallpox, leprosy, diphtheria, tuberculosis. The infection rates of these infectious diseases have not increased, but have declined slightly. Gretel narrowed his eyes slightly. If the total number of patients increases and the infection rate of certain infectious diseases decreases, then there must be a dominant disease. Which one? Which disease has become widespread? Light and shadow flipped rapidly. It's not cholera, it's not anthrax, it's not the plague. Thankfully, neither was the plague. Damn it, it's typhoid. Poor people, businessmen and handicraftsmen, soldiers, it stands to reason that soldiers have relatively strong physiques and are not easy to get sick. However, according to reports that Greet saw, the proportion of typhoid fever among soldiers who evacuated to the Kingdom of Kent to recuperate has increased significantly. In fact, the infection rate among 3rd level, 4th level warriors, and even knights has also increased. That's right, military camps are densely populated and have poor sanitary conditions. As long as one person is infected, an outbreak will be very scary. Typhoid fever is not easy to deal with. The Great Typhoid Fever in the late Eastern Han Dynasty seemed to have killed half of the country's population. Of course, typhoid fever in traditional Chinese medicine and typhoid fever in Western medicine are not the same thing. However, every infectious disease, even a Class B infectious disease, can kill people like rivers of blood if given a chance. Moss. Help me make an appointment with the medical review committee. Gretel jumped out of the bathtub and rushed out. With a bang, he hit the door. Ouch. Moss, what are you doing? Boss, you once authorized me. Moss's voice was extremely innocent. I must stop you when you rush out of the bathroom without clothes. The Parliament also attached great importance to the information brought by Greet. The review member of the medical branch spread out a report with a smile and asked Greet to take a look. Master Nordmark, your information greatly supports the information we have obtained. Currently we have received reports that typhoid fever has broken out in a large area in the Netherlands, especially in military camps, on both sides. Yes, the spillage is so severe, it proves that the situation in the Netherlands is very serious. Gretel nodded vigorously. If there is no data on the outbreak of foreign epidemics, a rough estimate can be made based on the number of spillovers. What is the formula for this estimate? He seems to have never learned. This is in the public health field, not the clinical field. It's very serious. The office door creaked open, and the member of the illusion department walked in with a stack of information. The latest battle report shows that the war in the Netherlands has temporarily stopped, and both sides are busy dealing with the plague, not only the military camps, but also the people of the Netherlands, as well as the Central Carolingian Kingdom, the Ardennes region, the Anjou region, the Upper and Lower Locks. In the forest area, all. He waved his hand and a map appeared. On the map, with the stalemate battle line between the two armies as the center, large red dots spread out, which was shocking. Greet sighed sadly. If a military camp is attacked or a battle line is attacked, it will be impossible for it not to spread. Various actions such as transporting grain and fodder, transporting ordnance and military pay, and evacuating wounded soldiers may trigger large-scale movements of personnel. The Netherlands can be infected in large areas, so the situation behind the Royal Army is not much better. And based on his experience, any kind of epidemic, when it reaches the point of outbreak or pandemic, cannot be suppressed by medical resources or magical resources. Streptomycin can treat typhoid fever. Greet suddenly stood up, faced the two committee members, and spoke urgently. I suggest mass-producing streptomycin preparations to supply to the front line and as an epidemic prevention reserve within the kingdom. I can discount or even temporarily postpone the collection of patent fees, but the production work must be done by recruiting natural priests. So can you do it by yourself? You are an 8th level nature priest. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Today, Hawaii's sports bracelet arrived. I originally wanted to try my best to swim and lose weight, but none of the gyms around me were open. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 889. The Magic Council's streptomycin production work is still vigorous and advancing with amazing momentum. Promote bacteria. Promote bacteria. Gather all the natural priests in Nevis and work hard to promote the relevant bacteria. Extract the bacterial liquid. Reaction. Purify. What about the transformation mage? Don't be idle, don't be in a daze. Even the factory is cranking up the horsepower. Those small boxes containing injections, small glass bottles, and those injection syringes and needles are not produced by factories, but do they have to rely on Gretel's mage tower? Of course, Greet himself still cheated and ran away instead of squatting in the bacteria room talking to bacteria every day. There was nothing he could do. When it came time to be drafted, he just wiped his face and pretended that he was a mage. In any case, after the production machines started rumbling, large quantities of pharmaceuticals were sent to the front line of the Netherlands. In the military camp, the Duke of the Netherlands, the nobles, as well as the soldiers who were dying of typhoid fever, had tears in their eyes. There's help. There is help. The medicine is finally here. Quick, give Jimmy a shot. And Don. Don can't survive it either. Don't worry, we have them all. The magician who transported the medicine unloaded 2 large boxes and another iron box with strong packaging and complicated magic spells engraved on the surface. This time we brought 2,000 medicines. How many patients do you have here? 500. Enough for 4 times. Check the number with me quickly, I have to run to the next camp. He opened the iron box, and a cold mist rose, revealing 2,000 crystal clear glass vials. The crowd gathered around with a roar, and the magician waved vigorously. Spread out, spread out. Let the person who receives the goods come. I have to teach you how to use this thing first. How to absorb injection liquid, how to prepare powder into injection, how to select the site, how to inject. The magician who delivered the goods was frothing at the mouth. He explained it 3 times and took a photo of the operating instructions before letting the smart young men follow them. However, with one glance, he immediately exploded. You. Wash your hands. Who told you to touch the syringe without washing your hands? Oh, I'm so tired. Although various problems arose during the operation, the arrival of a large number of pharmaceuticals was like rain, nourishing the thirsty military camp. Within a few days, good news was frequently reported to the Duke of the Netherlands. Half of the patients in the wounded barracks have gone away from their fever. There are only about 20 left and the fever has not gone away. At Count William's side, the soldiers are more than half better. Count Flanders asked if he could allocate some more medicine for the relatives of the soldiers. The Duke of the Netherlands let out a long breath. No wonder the potions sent by the council were far more than what was needed to treat the soldiers. It turned out that they had already planned for today. The plague spreads among men and women, young and old, common people and nobles. If soldiers can still carry it with their strong physique, civilians will fall like wheat. When there is no magic, potions, even magicians' potions, will become their last hope. These medicines, the potions for mixing medicines, glass bottles and syringes all cost money to buy, and the price of each one is not cheap. However, compared to the value of a common person, a skilled craftsman is much cheaper. I can allocate 500 copies. If Earl of Flanders still needs it, he can order it in advance, the Duke said solemnly. Cash, using goods to offset the account, or signing a contract, Any of them are fine. Anyway, he doesn't do business with that place twice. Only with the military can we have the strength to sustain it, only with the people can we have a steady supply of troops and supplies, and only with the hope of recovery after the war is over. Buy, 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 grit your teeth to squeeze out the bone marrow and pinch your nose to buy. Poor resistance army's healing power is not much. Dozens of magicians, either raised by noble families or sent to the Holy See for training by their children, had no choice but to side with their families. There have been a number of healers who have betrayed the Holy See and declared that my magic comes directly from God, but the number is still not enough for most of them and they are only willing to wander among the people. The healing potions I saved before the incident and the healing potions I bought from the Kingdom of Kent are almost used up again. This small amount of healing power is usually insufficient to treat wounded soldiers. When the Great Plague comes, it is simply a drop in the bucket, and every splash is gone. Well, luckily there are new medicines supported by the Council, otherwise we really wouldn't be able to survive. The healing power on the other side is so many times stronger than ours. On the opposite side, Wankuajun was also in dire straits. The commander-in-chief of the royal army, Duke Flamengo, runs to the Inquisition's camp once a day. Cardinal Gravilla, Grand Magistrate Gravilla, please send a few more bishops. Even some priests. My soldiers, those pious young men, they are all dying. Got it? Your Majesty the Duke, we have tried our best. Grand Referee Gravilla made a prayer gesture with a face that was not angry but became even more majestic when angry. There are only so many bishops who can completely cure the plague. Among the priests and deacons, a small number of them are bedridden one after another. Or can you provide some supplies and we can have a big prayer? What a joke. The current healing power of the Inquisition is only enough to maintain the Black Cavalry itself and some of the top brass of the Royal Army. Want to cover lower-level soldiers? When did magical healing cover low-level soldiers? This. Duke Flamengo hesitated. To provide materials for large-scale prayers, this does not provide bread, milk, coffee, candy, etc., but refers to magical materials. Sacred vessel, sacred object. At the very least, it must be large pieces of silver, not silver coins, but refined pure silver. Like charcoal, it is burned in large magical arts. Want to offer less? Can. In that case, what will be burned is the vitality and spiritual power of the person, and even the soul of the devout believer. So why on the battlefield? That kind of large-scale magic is particularly effective and consumes much less than usual. On the one hand, it is because of the unprecedented concentration of spiritual will in the war, and on the other hand, it is also because there are a large number of believers' souls to burn. I will go to urge the rear to provide a batch of supplies as soon as possible. He retreated sadly. Write letters to the king, write letters to the nobles on the home front. Lose your face, behave wildly, threaten and induce. No matter what, you have to bring something to me. The boys are dying of illness. If this continues, the battle will be unwinnable. The war horses galloped, delivering the Duke's letter to the king and to the nobles in the middle of the Brolin kingdom behind the battle lines. The Duke of Ardennes, the nobleman closest to the battle line, received the letter and threw it down angrily without even reading it. I'm here to ask for money again. I'm here to ask for things again. I'm here to ask for people again. Tell that guy, no. I'm already sick in my own castle. Theoretically, the king would be responsible for sending troops to the Netherlands, without the help of these local nobles. But in fact, you need help transporting food, right? You need help purchasing supplies, right? When the Holy See mobilizes healers, it is done within their internal system. You can't say anything about people who are nearby to adjust your territory. Don't you want all the bishops and archbishops in your territory to be taken away? Come on, give me the money. Moreover, A large part of the king's military expenditures are also taxes collected from them. No money. The vineyards had no harvest last year, and I couldn't make a bottle of wine. I had no place to sell it, and I couldn't get any money from it. The Duke of Ardennes walked around the office, his beard bristling like an angry lion. In his territory, the main pillar industry is specialty wine. The style is elegant and delicate and dense, with rich bubbles. In order to sell this wine better, the Duke even applied for a royal decree to name this wine after the producing area under his jurisdiction. Wine from other regions can only be called sparkling wine, not the same name as products from their territory. Last year, due to the severe disaster, the grape yield was in shambles. Even if the grapes could barely bear fruit, the quality was not enough to make wine. Besides, even if it is brewed, who will he sell it to? King. The king never pays. Glory Holy City. Not only does the Holy City not pay, but it also requires a tribute fee before you are allowed to pay tribute to the Lord of Glory. Those wealthy businessmen from the Netherlands. Those rich people are at war, and the poor are almost dying of poverty. Kingdom of Kent? What a joke, now that the war is spreading and the inspections on the sea are becoming more and more strict, the goods cannot be transported at all. The Duke of Ardennes became more and more angry. After walking around the office several times, he simply ordered. Strictly check. Strictly check. Strictly check all personnel and materials. Now that the plague is prevalent, we must resolutely prevent the plague from spreading to the front lines. No sick people or sick goods are allowed to pass. Meanwhile, the Grand Duchess of Alva was also furious in the castle. Compared with the Duke of Ardennes, whose wallet was damaged, the anger of the Grand Duchess of Alva burned through the sky even more. Where's Anna? Where's Lisa? Where's Julie? In such a big castle, even little Henry's wet nurse can't be found. And there are maids, are all the maids dead? No one even washes the sheets and diapers. Dear master. The head maid came up to speak tremblingly. Since the plague spread nearby, you have issued an order. All servants, if anyone in the family has a headache, fever, chills, vomiting or diarrhea, is not allowed to approach the young master, or touch the young master's belongings. Recently. So someone in their family is sick, the Grand Duchess laughed angrily. So where is the priest? Where is the bishop? Why don't you go and invite him? Do you want me to breastfeed little Henry and wash his diapers myself? The head maid became even more frightened, bowed her head and backed away, not daring to say a word. The housekeeper had no choice but to step forward and report. Half of the nearby healers have been mobilized over there, as you know, the remaining half has been affected by the recent plague, and there are a lot of people asking for them. It's okay to ask them to treat the nobles, but to treat the servants, There's no end to this bad war. The Grand Duchess of Alva became even more angry. She turned her head and looked to the north, towards the direction where the battle line between the royal army and the Dutch were stalemate. Her eyes were like spitting fire. Order. In order to prevent the epidemic from spreading and infecting my little Henry, the entire territory will be strictly inspected. Everyone who enters the territory, except for knights and clergy, must be quarantined on the spot for 7 days. They must be sure that they are not infected before they can be released. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Today I found another testing point with no one around, so I went to do the testing at the speed of light, hee. Then I saw 2 spots with long queues of more than 50 people within 10 minutes of walking near the testing point. I feel like I've earned it. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Giolan 2020. Chapter 890. Duke Flamengo suddenly found that his life here was difficult. First, supplies. The delivery of supplies to the rear has always been very regular, grain and grass are delivered every 10 days, valuable and light supplies are delivered every 5 days, and military orders and letters are delivered as soon as they arrive. But now, the wine, ham and oysters that were supposed to be delivered to the military camp were 2 days late. Forget about everything else, if the oysters get stuck on the road, they will rot. What's going on? He sent his trusted attendant back to inquire. The attendant worked hard and ran for 2 whole days before he rushed over sweating and replied. Replying to your excellency, it is the territory of the Duke of Ardennes that has set up checkpoints along the road. It is said that the plague has been too severe recently, and people and goods must be strictly checked on the road. Anyone who is sick or whose goods are contaminated will be detained together with the goods. Duke of Flamengo. Is this a plague investigation? This is targeting me. Pass my order, and if you don't open the checkpoint quickly, I will treat them as maliciously detaining military supplies and punish them as treason. The attendant rushed back to deliver the message. The Duke of Flamengo poured himself a glass of 3-year-old champagne, and after tasting the ham happily, he went out to appease his subordinates. There is a little trouble in the transportation of military supplies. If you just be patient, it will be solved soon. When you go out to fight, it will not be like having a dance party in the royal capital. Everything is complete. Let's work hard to overcome it. The nobles complained. Duke Flamengo reassured and comforted him, and promised, when the supplies arrive, let's have a banquet and relax, and finally suppressed him. After the suppression here, they still have to visit the Grand Inquisitor over there. After all, although the clergy live in hardship and simplicity, necessary supplies still have to be supplied. Just like although they strictly abide by the commandments and cannot drink alcohol, the water of wisdom packaged in the shell of the Holy Book is still indispensable. His Excellency the Duke urged us in many ways and finally received the first batch of supplies. However, the second batch of valuable materials, including the grain and grass that should have arrived at the military camp together with the valuable materials, just. So why is it happening this time? Is the Duke of Ardennes still strictly investigating the plague? Still investigating, but the Duke has ordered that the royal army's convoy can be let go. But what? Asked the Duke urgently. The attendant shifted his weight from his left foot to his right foot, and then from his right foot to his left foot, with an uneasy look on his face. But in many places, roadblocks and horse barriers have been set up in order to carry out the order. It is very troublesome to dismantle them one by one. In some places, roads have been dug or bridge decks have been demolished. Duke Flaminge's eyesight went dark. By digging roads and demolishing bridges, blocking traffic in this way, light riders and fast horses can pass through casually, or just take a slight detour, but heavily loaded grain and grass carts. Forget it, I'll write him another letter. Duke Flamengo sighed. Speaking of which, the Duke of Ardennes is also a powerful duke with a large territory. He is ranked higher than him in the aristocratic hierarchy. People can really ignore him. The letter was written, but it was of some use, and the food and grass were delivered with great difficulty. However, what came with the grain transport team was more bad news. The Grand Duchess of Alva has ordered strict inspections. All people entering the territory must be quarantined for 7 days to ensure that they do not have typhoid fever before they can move around. The Count of Anjou has ordered that all outsiders entering the territory must obtain a disease-free certificate from the local church within 1 day. Otherwise, they are not allowed to ride in carriages, boats, stay in hotels, or stay in hotels. Enter any public place. The Duke of Lorraine. The Duke of Lower Lorraine. Bad news comes one after another. Duke Flamengo was dizzy and almost wanted to vomit blood. These central barbarians, do they want to rebel? Whether the nobles in central Brolin want to rebel or not, they have to go back to the king, or even to the glorious Holy See, and fight with all their strength. What lies before Duke Flamengo is a naked practical problem. The food and grass are gone. Military pay is gone. For food and grass, you can also send troops to search everywhere, smash open every barn, and pry open every cellar. Anyway, the grain is heavy and difficult to transport. It is impossible for those Dutch country bumpkins to transport all the grain. Military pay is another story. No matter what the world is like, businessmen run faster than farmers, and rich people run faster than poor people. The farmers are still digging caves hard, trying to hide the last bag of grain. Where are the businessmen? Moisten it, it has been moistened 800 years ago. Anyway, it is common for business people to run around everywhere. Packing up the gold and silver, they can go wherever they can. When Duke Flamengo remembered that he ransacked every house and extorted those shops, workshops, and factories to give out gold coins. Sorry, this is Bishop so-and-so's property. Sorry, this workshop has been donated to a certain monastery. I'm sorry, this workshop is where the nuns produce sacrificial vestments and tapestries and worship the Lord of Glory. Are you sure, if you can't pay 100 gold coins in 3 days, will the workshop be closed? Businessmen are the most cunning, Duke Flamengo gritted his steel teeth. No wonder the Holy Scriptures say that it is more difficult for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God than for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. Such a cunning and penniless person deserves to go to hell after his death. No, even if they are alive, as long as they are caught by him, they will be tied to the stake one by one. The Duke of Flamengo cursed hard, cursed hard. After the curse is over, we still have to try our best to raise money for these soldiers. There is no way, without military pay, they really don't work. Not only did they not work, but they also became deserters. No, in the name of raising their own military pay, they went to surrounding cities and villages to plunder randomly. Forget it, they still rebelled. They really dared to mutiny. Can you believe that even the king's army dared to mutiny with the Inquisition's black cavalry on its side? Oh, although the Black Knights of the Inquisition did not openly rebel, they also secretly stopped working. His Excellency the Duke held him with one hand and beat him with the other. He hanged a few and appeased many more, promising to make up for the military pay as soon as possible. Yes, make up the amount and add interest. He wrote diligently to ask for military pay from the king. There was no reply to the first letter, and there was no reply to the second letter. After 7 or 8 consecutive letters, the news from the king finally arrived. No money. The royal family has no money, the treasury has no money, national bonds cannot be sold, businessmen refuse to borrow money, in short, there is no money. The country is already in a serious fiscal crisis. Hope Duke of Flamenco. Be able to experience the difficulty of the situation so that you can deal with it yourself and not increase the burden on the king. Is the king declared bankrupt? The Duke held the letter in both hands. The great knight, who could wield a giant sword as big as his body and crack mountains and rocks, was holding a thin roll of parchment, his hands trembling. Can a king or a country also declare bankruptcy? We haven't declared bankruptcy yet. His secretary pushed the rim of his tortoise-shell glasses and said in a solemn voice. However, the king has already refused to pay once. It is said that his wedding cost another 20 years of taxes. In the language of our businessmen, this situation is called extremely low credit rating. Generally speaking, businessmen the regiment will not lend him any more money. Duke. He later remembered a proverb, you don't have to wait until the last leaf falls to know that winter has come. If I had known that the king would be so shameless, I should have thought of what happened today when he lost his face and refused to pay the national debt of the Netherlands. If you can avoid paying the national debt there, you can naturally avoid paying the military pay here. If he hadn't wanted to add another piece of land to his family, he wouldn't have ended the battle in the west and rushed back with an army of 20,000. Well now, I rushed back and stepped into the quagmire. The Duke endured a mouthful of blood that rushed to his throat. He lost his temper and continued to write. To the clan members of the family, to one's relatives and friends, to the bishops of various churches, to the priests, to the central nobles headed by the Duke of Ardennes, to the wealthy businessmen in the noble territories. Borrow money. If you can borrow empty-handed, borrow empty-handed. If you can't borrow empty-handed, borrow a mortgage. If you can't, just sell the gold and silver you have on hand and all your belongings that can be sold. The silver helmets and gold collars captured in battle against the barbarians. Fighting in the west, a set of gold pots and cups were captured. A New World-style gold crown as a gift from the king. The trophies obtained on the battlefield in the Netherlands, a full set of armor, weapons, and BMW. All the same, they left their owners and ended up in the hands of unknown people. Not long after, the Duke's tent looked as clean as if it had been washed by floods, and as if it had been robbed. In exchange for jingling gold and silver coins, they were distributed to the knights and their retinues and warriors, in exchange for the temporary obedience of these people. However, the time you can buy gold coins is limited. 1 month, 2 months. The Duke of Flamengo's face and treasures were finally exhausted. Faced with the threat of another mutiny, he desperately rushed into the Inquisition barracks and rushed to the Grand Inquisitor Gravilla. "I need money. I need money. I can't find even a small change, and I can't expect the king to send money here. I can't borrow a penny. No one here has any credit, no one." Grand Referee Gravilla slowly stood up. Before he had time to answer, he continued to roar. "Without a miracle, the entire army will fall apart in just the blink of an eye. In the blink of an eye. From the moment I noticed something was wrong and left the military tent, before I even reached you, the entire army was over. It's over. In that case, let's start another war." Grand Referee Gravilla replied slowly. The Duke was stunned for a moment. "What? Start another war?" The chief referee's voice was firm. His grey eyes couldn't see any waves, like a piece of hard ice, looking into the distance. "Defeat the rebel army and capture the city of sinners. Tell the soldiers that when the Netherlands is captured, everything will be theirs." Duke Flamengo suddenly felt his heart beating very fast. He opened his mouth and tried twice before he made a sound with his dry throat. Then, the people in the city. At that time, the Lord sent down brimstone and fire from heaven to that city. The chief judge recited expressionlessly. "Destroy those cities, the whole plain, and all the inhabitants of the cities, even what grows on the ground. Your Excellency, do you have any questions?" "There is no doubt, and I dare not have any more doubts." Duke Flamengo bowed deeply and left silently. Before returning to his camp, he heard earth-shattering cheers coming from the military camp. The army broke out of camp in a mighty manner. Such an obvious move would naturally not escape the eyes of the monitors. The Parliament's response to this was, "The chess piece of Ostend can finally be moved." Although I understand the truth, I still can't figure out what it means when a country declares bankruptcy and issues a bankruptcy order. I really want to declare that my brain is bankrupt, that I have no ideas, that I don't want to write a word. Lie down. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks to @bookfriend 201709291418402555 for the reward of 100 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Giolan 2020. Chapter 891. The Count and Lady of Ostend stood side by side on the balcony of the command post in the center of the fortress, looking at the towering St. Lily Cathedral in the center of the city and its gleaming spire pointing straight into the sky. From time to time, a ray of white light bursts out from the spire, diffusing all around, and the entire city of Ostend was shrouded in it. Do you want to do it? Do it. Once you take action, there's no turning back. We had no way of turning back. Count Ostend squeezed the lady's hand tightly with a determined look on his face. He looked up at the tall bell tower of the church and the spire overlooking the city, with hatred in his eyes. From the moment I fought desperately for them and got seriously injured, but they didn't give me proper treatment, I couldn't look back. Ever since I gave birth to 3 sons in a row, but they killed 2 of them, I can't look back. From the moment I sent André to the Kingdom of Kent and the council cured the child, there was no turning back. He took his wife's hand and walked inside. Walking to the shadow where the sun couldn't shine, he suddenly leaned forward and hugged his wife hard. Going forward, from the moment I fell in love with you and married you, it was destined to be this day. I can't go back, and I don't want to go back. The Countess hugged her husband with her backhand, buried her head on his shoulder, and her hair gently brushed his cheek. After a long time, the female magician whispered, "There are many ways to control a person in magic. If you fail, hand me over and say that I used magic to control you." Before he could finish speaking, his waist was tightened so tightly that he couldn't breathe. The Count struggled to hug his wife tightly, drawing his arms inward, almost crushing her in his arms. "If we want to live, live together, if we want to die, die together. 2 people holding hands, straight down, straight down." Arriving at the control center underground of the command post, the man's generous hands and the woman's slender hands overlapped and pressed hard on a mechanism. Boom! Amidst the earth-shattering explosion, the Holy Lily Cathedral in the center of the city shook, and the spire slowly broke and fell. Then, the power of the divine magic circle, the power stored for hundreds of years in the St. Lily Cathedral, poured out and swept in all directions. Like a hurricane blowing across the ground, in the city, roof tiles flew off, flower pots fell, and pedestrians staggered and were pushed by the wind, almost falling to the ground. At the port, the sails were full, the masts were swaying, and some ships that had just anchored and had not tied their moorings rumbled into each other. On the sea, the wind was rolling, the waves were rolling, and huge waves were beating on the side of the ship. There was a boatman who had just thrown out of his fishing net, and was swept up by the waves and fell directly into the sea. And inside the cathedral, a white light immediately shot out, as if trying to activate some protective shield. However, the explosion did not know where it was injured. The white light rose, dissipated, rose again, and dissipated again, like a broken light bulb, but did not light up in the end. Finally, as the ultimate defense and warning, a thick white smoke column rose straight from the center of the church. Not long after the smoke column rose into the sky, alarm bells blared more than 30 miles away. Soon, the sound of bells spread from one city to another, from one church to another. Except for Ostend, the other cities in the 6 connected cities lit up their defenses one after another. Able Ostend. Earth-shaking roars came from the cathedral in the center of Dick City, the one closest to Ostend in the 7 connected cities. The 7 connected cities, including Ostend, are a thorn in the heart of the Parliament. 7 cities, 7 cathedrals, 7 magical arrays. Taking the narrowest point of Hall Strait as the center point, it extends to the southwest and northeast, covering a width of 200 miles. These 7 magical arrays are connected to each other, with an attack range of more than 10 miles. When fully activated, the scanning distance covers more than 2/3 of the narrowest part of the Hall Strait. The only safe channel left for ships from the Kingdom of Kent is a narrow side. This chain locked the Hall Strait and also locked the transportation route from the Kingdom of Kent to the mainland. Or, under the surveillance of the magic circle, be careful and disguise yourself to sneak across, and once you are discovered, you will be finished. Or, they pay a large amount of gold coins as bribes and hope that the port managers and maritime patrol fleets will be lenient and treat them as merchant ships carrying uncontrolled goods during normal times, which greatly increases the cost. Or, rely on your own combat power and spells to move forward bravely. The last path is the choice of many young magicians, especially those who choose to take the combat route. They often talk about when will I break through the Hall Strait. Either way, either the economic cost will skyrocket or the risk cost will skyrocket. If you don't want to go through the Hall Strait, you can either set sail directly from the south of the Brolen Kingdom, or set sail directly from the northern Netherlands or even the Rhine Kingdom. The extra distance and the extra shipping risks put the merchants of the Kingdom of Kent at a clear disadvantage in the international market. If the Magic Council hadn't really worked hard to develop new technologies and reduce production costs, everyone's life would have been even more difficult. Needless to say, if the magicians who escaped from the mainland want to go to the Kingdom of Kent, or if the magicians of the kingdom want to travel to the mainland, they are really working with their heads in their belts. Parliament has long wanted to pull out this thorn and break this chain. Since the Glory Holy See was driven out of the Kingdom of Kent, it took groups of magicians more than 10 years to do so. The first choice was the one in the center of the 7 link cities and the one guarding the narrowest point of the Hall Strait, Calais. However, the city of Calais has the strictest defense, and the priest stationed at the church is also the highest level, a 15th level archbishop. The Parliament watched for 7 or 8 years and could not find any flaws. After analyzing and judging one by one, it was with great difficulty that I finally opened a gap in Count Ostend. The medical work that Greet was responsible for was only part of the rebellion. Apart from him, the Parliament has invested countless efforts in front and back, inside and out. But the work eventually paid off. Before the war in the Netherlands began, Count Ostend turned to the Parliament and sent his son as a hostage. When the war began, under the pretense of strengthening the city's defenses, he mobilized a large number of men and built a strong fortress close to the city wall. This latest type of fortress is pentagonal in shape and is surrounded by a deep river. There is also a layer of walls and a layer of fortress inside. He pretended to cooperate with the requirements of the Royal Army, and did not leave any difficulties in the transportation of materials and manpower arrangements. He gave full support, so that Ostend became the material distribution center for the rear. When the plague was prevalent and the Royal Army mobilized a large number of manpower, he reluctantly sent the Bishop of St. Lily Cathedral to the front line. Then, when the army, desperate, broke out of camp and headed towards the Netherlands, and had already walked most of the way. Boom! A loud noise destroyed the foundation of the magical array of St. Lily Cathedral, and also created a fatal gap in the magical chain of 7 link city. The loss of one of the 7 magical arrays is not as simple as the loss of 1/7. The scanning range, the attack range, the maximum attack power, and even the balance of the magic array itself will cause big problems. It's starting over in Ostend. In the Hall Strait, amid the intertwined Dutch sea beggars' legion, an inconspicuous small fishing boat opened its awning. In the canopy of the boat, a magician wearing a hat and short clothes, dressed no different from a beggar, silently raised his telescope. Follow the gap in the boat canopy and observe attentively the tall smoke column in the center of the city, and the half-covered minaret in the smoke column. Our allies have done a good job. Then, it's our turn next. Send a message to the rear, and then speed up the ship immediately. We have to get to Ostend before the support of the Holy See arrives. Ostend has taken action. The bursting white light was also observed in the Star Dome of Nevis and the Great Magic Circle. A jury member who came to wait at an appointed time smiled. Let's not be idle. Those who need to be rushed over should be rushed over, and the supplies that should be brought over should be brought over. Also, inform our allies. The main force of the Duke of the Netherlands, the army led by the nobles of the Netherlands, must know this good news as soon as possible. Also, in the middle of Brolen Kingdom, those nobles who are estranged from the king and have been trying their best to cause trouble in both sides of the world recently should let them know the news quickly. The Kingdom of Kent is not the only one who has endured the Holy See for many years. The remaining 6 buildings in the 7 link cities have already been alarmed. In Dick City, the city closest to Ostend, the Holy Knights gathered in the cathedral to prepare their troops. Prepare to go out for war, and be prepared for an attack from Ostend at any time. The leaders of the remaining 5 churches quickly gathered at the Solace Cathedral in Calia City, the center of the 7 cities. Look left and right, there are only 3 archbishops in the 5 churches. One is level 15, one is level 11, and one is level 10. In order to wipe out the Netherlands, the 7 connected cities took away 3 archbishops, including the one from Dick City, leaving only 4. As for the bishop who looks after the house, he lacks prestige and strength. Defending your home is enough, but want to attack? Notify the Holy See immediately. The Archbishop of Calia City has the highest rank and is also the leader of everyone. In an emergency, he has the authority to command all 7 churches and fully activate the magical array. At this moment, he slapped the table and said in a sonorous tone, "Then, we gather our strength and send out troops immediately. We must capture the traitor before he escapes. I think we should talk to a few city lords and borrow some soldiers and horses." The Archbishop of the Sea Cliff Cathedral in Cologne City smiled half-heartedly, and his gold-rimmed white robe wavered slightly. Half of the holy knights have been robbed, and half of the bishops and priests in the city have also been robbed. If we take away more people, if there is any conspiracy on the other side, my small town may not be able to save it. Or wait until the royal army comes back. The Archbishop of Bankton City is the lowest ranking but the oldest. He is here just to gain seniority. He made a trembling comment. It should be easier to fight from both ends. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks to Achaska for the 100 starting coins. Today is the last day of the Dragon Boat Festival. It's raining so hard that I can't go out for a walk. Cats hate the rain and roll over. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 892. Troops should be sent out immediately. We don't have enough troops, so we must report it to the Glory Holy City, who will send a large army. I think we should contact the local lords and let the nobles coordinate to send troops. Why don't they send troops? Why do they only send a few troops? A city like Ostend cannot be defeated by hundreds or 1,000 people. I still suggest contacting the army in front. When the army returns, we will attack from the front and back, and everything will be solved. Perhaps the army will be stuck on the road, and then they will attack from both sides. Led by Archbishop Joyce, the leader of the clergy in Calia City and guarding the Solace Cathedral, the 6 leaders had 3 different opinions. Anyone who comes up with an idea will be criticized by the other 2. 2 votes to 1 vote can barely form a unified opinion. 1 vote to 1 vote to 1 vote, even after 3 days and 3 nights, no unified opinion can be formed. Finally, Archbishop Joyce snorted coldly and stood up. I will report to the Holy City of Glory first. Everyone, join me in opening the magical array and open the channel. On this point, the others didn't have any opinions, or in other words, even if they had opinions, they couldn't raise them at this time. Everyone left the conference room and arrived at the small prayer room under the altar. Archbishop Joyce personally wrote and drafted a report, showed it to the rest of the people, and stamped his seal ring one by one. Then, everyone gathered around the center of the array and knelt down to pray. My Lord, you are high in the sky, shining on everything. Nothing in the world can block your sight, and no existence can blind your perception. My Lord, your loyal servant prays to you here. Please open your power and let your agent in the world know everything that is happening here and now. While praying loudly, the gems inlaid on the magic array lit up one after another. Archbishop Joyce was the leader, and the other bishops, in order, pressed their hands on the magic array and input the holy power. Soon, a little white light lit up from the center, and within a breath, it expanded into an elliptical light gate. The archbishop had a sharp eye and quickly stuffed the report away. Then, one, another, and another, all hands left the array. The light door flashed and then went out quietly. Everyone wait here, arrange your attendance first, and go back to make preparations. Archbishop Joyce stood up and looked around at everyone majestically. Personnel, supplies, communicating with local lords. When the Holy City sends people over, if no preparations are made, I don't think anyone will be willing to try the Holy City's wrath. The news of the fall of Ostend and the disintegration of the chain of the Great Magic Circle was transmitted to the Glory Holy City on the same day as the Divine Magic Circle was conveying it without hesitation. The Pope is angry, the leader of the Holy Knights is angry, the Grand Inquisitor is angry. In short, the Archbishop and the bishops waited in the underground altar for less than 4 hours. The aperture lit up, and a roll of parchment with the holy emblem printed on it was thrown straight out of the aperture. With Archbishop Joyce leading all the bishops, take decisive action to regain control of Ostend Cathedral. If not, then heretics and traitors should be severely punished, so that the lambs of our Lord will know the majesty of God. To this end, Archbishop Joyce is authorized to use all means of attack except the last resort. The attack should be successful within 3 days. If it cannot be conquered within 3 days, the local situation should be maintained and wait for the arrival of people from the Holy See. Everyone, the Pope's will is very clear. Archbishop Joyce respectfully read the edict and showed the parchment to the surrounding bishops and archbishops with a solemn expression. Within 3 days, we must launch a powerful attack and achieve decisive results. To this end, I propose to combine the power of 6 magical arrays and activate the Glory Holy Sword. Who is in favor and who is against? In the city of Cologne, the Archbishop of Seacliff Cathedral hesitated to speak, and finally swallowed his words. In Bankton City, the Archbishop of the Flower Cathedral lowered his head silently and remained silent. The city of Left and Right Bankton is the farthest from Ostend, and its church also requires the least amount of magical power. The other 2 bishops who were looking after the house were even more silent. If the sky falls, there will be tall people to support it. The tall people will stop talking. What do they say? Okay, sign the documents and notify Dick City. 3. Archbishop Joyce looked at the people next to him, estimated the time it would take for the farthest bishop to rush back to the church and arrange everything, and gave one a more generous timetable. 6 hours later, ring the holy bell and start collective prayer. Tomorrow morning, when the first ray of sunlight shines on the ground, activate the Glory Holy Sword and cut through the city of Ostend. For the glory of the Lord of Radiance. For the glory of the Lord of Glory. The bishops present collectively made prayer gestures and responded in unison. The bishops, the archbishops, the followers, and the paladins galloped back to the city with their horses' hooves on their feet. Soon, in the city where everyone was stationed, the holy knights came out in all directions, driving the citizens into chaos. Everyone, come to the church tonight to pray. No one is missing. What? Your Tommy's leg is broken? Don't worry. We have made arrangements. There will be stewards on every street, and there will be special cars to transport people who are inconvenient to move. Pregnant women? Pregnant women come too. We won't let you stay in the church until you give birth. Besides, if you give birth, there will be magical treatment in the church. Isn't it safer? No matter how the search was conducted, it was still protracted. All in all, the bells of each church rang on time. In the churches of each city, a large number of people also gathered. Under the leadership of the priest, they fell down in front of the altar and prayed loudly to the Lord of Glory. O Most High Lord, we come before you to pray for our brothers who are far away in Ostend. Please give us your grace and blessing and let the brothers there return to your grace. We pray to you today to let our brothers and sisters have strong faith. Sovereign Lord, I entrust my health, my family, my job, my career, and my life to your hands. Please take care of me, protect me, and bless me. O Most High Lord! The priests opened sacred texts and lit candles. The acolytes around them shook the sacred bells and struck the golden bells. The boys in the choir sang hymns loudly, making the atmosphere of the entire church seem like a dream. Every hour of prayer, there are even devotees serving in the church distributing drinking water one by one. 4 hours later, another large bucket was brought in and brown bread and hot oatmeal were distributed. If it weren't for the occasional coughing sound in the church, or someone running out of the hall quietly with their hands on their stomachs and a grimace, the whole prayer process would have been perfect. Even so, a thin mist of light gradually rose from the hall to the altar, from the altar to the church steeple. From the magical network throughout the city, it was concentrated to the cathedral in the center of the city, and then to the entire magical array. The attack is coming. Yes, the first attack must be the most powerful attack. On the wall of the Star Castle, the Earl and Countess of Ostend stood side by side, looking into the dark night in the southwest. Even though they couldn't see or hear, the heavy pressure in the air still continued to sting their spiritual senses. When I was a child, I saw a magical formation being activated once. That time, Ostend's magical formation alone blasted a ship 5 miles away, including the ship and its people, into 2 pieces. The Cathedral of St. Lily has been bombed by us. The Countess forced a smile and shook her husband's hand. The magical formation below is also disabled. The nearest city of Dix is more than 30 miles away. Even if we hit it, it won't be too powerful. Don't worry. You don't have to worry. Count Ostend put his arm around the lady's shoulders and pushed her down. Go to sleep, I'm here. You are a spellcaster. You have to ensure sleep so that you can have enough spells tomorrow, right? After persuading and pushing, he finally brought his wife back to the room and put her to sleep. Then, his face sank and he strode out. Wear armor for me. Tonight, before sunrise, we must knock down the Cathedral of St. Lily. Those who are stubbornly resisting inside don't have to worry about catching anyone alive. They will be wiped out. Don't worry, it's already being done. A leisurely voice interface with a slight smile answered. Count Ostend turned his head and saw a slender black-haired young man strolling out and smiled at him. Leave the church matters to us. Your Excellency, what you need to deal with now is... He tilted his head to the side. Immediately, a young man with a stiff face walked slowly over and stood in front of the Count. The black-haired young man continued to smile. We found this, your distant relative southwest of Ostend, 10 miles away from the city. We were worried about his safety, so we invited him back. The Earl frowned deeply. This guy was his distant relative, and he was also the one the Holy See favored to inherit his title after his youngest son passed away. He pressed the hilt of the sword, released it, and took 2 steps forward. Kyujin, what are you doing out of the city? The young man's expression was very strange, it seemed to be both hatred and struggle. The black-haired young man smiled and made a gesture. What are you going to do? Tell me. Lord Earl, please don't worry, we have put magic on him, he can only tell the truth. I'm going to report to the Holy See. Kyujin squeezed out his voice word by word. Count Ostend closed his eyes, opened them, then closed them again. Okay. Then, please go and report to the Lord of Glory. The sword goes out, the sword goes in. A flash of blood burst out, and the young man fell to the ground. Your Majesty, the Count is really decisive, the black-haired young man gave a thumbs up. The mage badge on his chest shines as brightly as the smile on his lips. Then I'm going to get busy. Tonight, I have to evacuate everyone and avoid the first wave of attacks from the Holy See. This night, the city of Ostend was buzzing with people and busy all night long. The next morning, when the first ray of sunlight illuminated the sky, the white light cut straight down like a sword. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of Thanks to @bookfriend 2022040216125138 for the reward of 324 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 893. The glorious holy sword was emptied and slashed down. From Bangtan, the farthest, to Kalias, the largest city and church, to Dix, the nearest. Stars of white light floated up bit by bit. At first they were thin and warm, but as they gathered more, the light gradually became more intense until they could no longer be seen. Nearly 200 miles away, the magical formation formed by 6 churches connected from a high altitude looks like a holy sword stretching across the earth. Tisk, 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 it looks very impressive. On the other side of the strait, a few small dots floated high in the clouds. As soon as one of them made a tut-tisk sound, the other one waved from a distance and was slapped on the forehead by a long gust of wind. Silence. Don't make any noise while watching this kind of scene. Do you think the sword will turn around and hit you? Who is making the big noise? The person who spoke before was chattering unwillingly. Soon, he was stopped by several people. Quiet. It's coming. Viewed from a very high altitude, a ray of morning light approaches from far away, advancing very quickly. Behind the area where the morning light advanced, the earth quickly became brighter, as if a paintbrush dipped in gold powder was following behind, smearing large areas wantonly. This kind of scene, no matter how many times you see it, makes you fascinated and unable to control yourself. And when this line of morning light reaches the connection with the magical array, boom! It was as if there was an invisible giant hand pulling out the radiant holy sword. Upright, swinging, slashing. With an upward wave, the clouds split and the floating clouds dispersed layer by layer, revealing the clear sky. Slashing down, the sword spanned an area of dozens of miles, and the tip of the sword gently touched the center of the star fortress just built by the Earl outside Ostend. The heavy fortress was cut in half silently. The lightsaber cut through the rock like a hot knife cutting through butter. In the center of the star fort, a blank space several meters wide instantly appeared. Swinging it horizontally, the white light suddenly exploded, and a huge explosion was centered on the star castle and pushed out horizontally. The star castle cracked, the city walls trembled, and the church with half of its spire blown off shook violently. From the secret room deep underground, a desperate cry came out. No. Boom. A second loud bang. This time, the air wave rolled back and bricks flew everywhere. The cathedral of St. Lily, which was still standing strong, collapsed with a rumble. Along with the air waves and bricks, a white light mist spread out and swept across the entire city. This power is very good across the strait, the magicians floating in the clouds praised. I haven't seen the great divine magic formation activated in many years. When the radiant holy sword fell, half of the energy stored in the 6 churches was drained, right? We should bring all the children at home to see this scene, especially little Gretel. It would be a pity not to let him see this scene. There will be opportunities in the future. Hey, I just don't know how the people who are performing the mission over there are doing now. The magicians performing the mission were ready. Everyone in the group of people closest to the city heard overlapping whispers. My lord! My lord! My lord, I praise you, I sing your praises, I worship you. Psychic attack. Plan 3. A magician shouted, reaching behind the collar and pulling hard. A ball of something like a silver hairnet rose up from his hand and was pulled forward by him, directly clasping his head. He immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Okay, I can't hear you anymore. As expected, the Vatican's brainwashing also includes some mind control spells. I need to remember this carefully. The magicians next to them also tied their own silver nets. Those who are unable to react, or whose eyes are a little straight-eyed, will inevitably be looked around by their colleagues, grabbed and forcibly buckled. As for whether the silver hairnet will create a mesh on the nose, then, ahem, life is important, and mental independence is important. It has to be said that the mental attack shielder developed by the puzzle control department is extremely effective. Non-frontal impact, low-intensity attacks, with this silver net, can be shielded to the point where they are almost imperceptible. The magicians each have a ball of silver glitter on their heads. After the equipment is completed, the head pops up from the ditch outside the city. Each person has an instrument, quickly adjusts it, and quickly records. 500 meters close to the blast center. Spell power, blue, reading 58. 800 meters close to the blast center. Spell power, cyan, reading 95. 1000 meters close to the explosion center. Spell power, cyan, reading 37. Don't go in. Wait until the attack is over. We have equipment in the center of the blast center. What if the instrument breaks down? If it's broken, it's broken. The instruments will be broken, and you won't be able to withstand it even if you go in. Most of the people who are busy here are from the conjuration system and the evocation system. In other words, apart from the magicians, there are only a few loyalists of the Holy See who are blocked in the cathedral and sealed by magic. The rest of the people, including citizens, farmers, and soldiers, all retreated 5 miles outside the city under the guidance of the Knights of Count Ostend. Those who refused to retreat, but unfortunately those who had a lot of things at home, were also huddled in the ditch, lying on the back of the hillside, not daring to move. Occasionally, someone would complain in a low voice. "How long do we have to stay? I'm cold and hungry." "Shut up. Don't die." The person who started to drink secretly turned his head and glanced at the semicircular hut next to him. In that hut covered with vines and looking no different from a mound, several weirdos were sleeping. It was these weirdos, playing the flute, walking slowly through the long street. Some have lively and joyful flute sounds, some have a lingering sound, some have long and short sounds, and are intermittent, and some make people feel like they are about to expire. But no matter how the flute played, those of them who did not follow the night all walked out of their homes inexplicably like they were possessed after hearing the sound of the flute. They lined up behind the flute player, 1 foot high and 1 foot low, walking out of the city and behind the hills outside the city. Some people immediately want to run back. The weirdo who played the flute didn't stop him. He just raised the flute to his lips and blew a few notes. Then, everyone watched helplessly as the people who escaped, like marionettes, returned to the team in a daze. Even if those weirdos didn't beat them, scold them, or let them walk into the river and drown, no one would want to experience that kind of horror again. Only one person begged in a low voice. "My father is still in the city, he broke his leg and can't walk." "Don't worry, someone will take care of it." The weird flute player, in the eyes of the citizens, the mage group sent by the control department, turned back and sat down, holding the flute and closing his eyes. Regarding how to evacuate the residents, the council has already made a plan. For those who cannot move, another group of mages will naturally be responsible. The control system comes out of the city, and the necromantic system comes on the scene. Each necromancer led a group of skeletons and a group of small bone rats, spreading out in streets and alleys. The bone rat has a small body and flexible movements. It can crawl and crawl everywhere. Most importantly, it will not miss any signs of life. Squeak! Squeak! The bone rat barked wildly. In the darkness, 2 skeletons wandered forward. Not long after, a door panel was removed with a click, and a hemiplegic old man was lifted out. The elderly, the disabled, and those with limited mobility. Each necromancer is responsible for a group of skeletons. When they are full, they will be sent outside the city, and then returned to the place where they are delivered. Except for the necromancer, who was wearing a fluttering black robe and looked like a ghost in the dark night. The people around you were creaking, and the people carrying people were all skeletons. In addition to the more terrifying visual effects, the purpose of transporting people was indeed achieved. Moreover, the combination of the charm control system and the necromantic system has a perfect shock and suppression effect. At this moment, a large number of people were lying on the back of the hillside, not daring to make any noise, not daring to make a scene, not even daring to breathe hard. He stretched out his head and looked at the city of Ostend in the distance. Watching the dawn come, watching the glorious holy sword strike down, watching the air waves flying across the sky, watching the church fall. All the people, especially the elderly farmers who had believed in the Lord of Light for generations and went to church every week, opened their mouths wide and looked at the path of the lightsaber in disbelief. It turns out, they want to kill us. That sword that fell from the sky, struck out of thin air without mercy. What would have happened if they were still in the city when the lightsaber struck? Will he be killed directly? Will he be beaten to pieces by flying bricks and stones, wailing for days and nights, and finally die without power? Or maybe, after being pressed lightly by the lightsaber, there seems to be no damage on the outside, but the soul has been taken away by the lightsaber? Such a pure and brilliant light sword could only have come from the Church of the Lord of Glory. When it fell, it wanted to kill them, in other words, it was not for the purpose of killing them, but it also had no pity for them. Life. Why? Why? Those who blew up the church and raised armies against the Holy See were clearly others, but in the eyes of the Holy See, do they, civilians who did nothing, deserve the same death? Why? Suddenly someone cried out in pain. Several magicians looked at each other and shrugged. Count Ostend took this opportunity to jump on a tree stump and shouted. Everyone has seen it. The Holy See of Glory doesn't care about your lives at all. The army is pushing over and everyone will die together. If you don't want to die, just follow me. Don't be afraid, everyone. They can only activate a great magic of this scale once. Next, we just need to repair the city and the fortress to withstand them, and we will survive. Let's go back and build the city defenses. Follow your lord. The trusted knight immediately raised his arms and shouted. Followed by other soldiers under the earl, and then followed by young citizens who were filled with indignation and infected by the atmosphere. Follow your lord. Follow your lord. Stand up to those bastards. Amid the fanatical shouting, several magicians whispered to each other. Hey, the city defenses can't be repaired so quickly, can they? That's right, after being struck by the lightsaber like this, all the magic defense underneath will be destroyed, right? How long will it take to practice? Ahem, there is no magic circle in the first place. Another insider laughed secretly. They are all earth and stones, just arranged according to the prototype of the shape, so that they can be filled with magic materials later. As for the city wall itself, I heard that the cement is coming soon. So, we used an empty city and a half-finished fortress, to deceive the Holy See into using a big move. The number of additional orders exceeded 800, and it's a huge blessing. It is said that the book reviews will be released tomorrow. But don't worry, everyone, I see every book review you make in the background. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks to Etya Mengbing for the 10,000 starting coins.